Fletcher's Solicitors are proud to sponsor the Mama Academy podcast series. We are one of the UK's leading birth injury specialists, trusted by families with the most complex legal cases. We champion better maternity care through every family's story. Fletcher's Solicitors, for every birth, for every baby, for every family. For more information about how we can help, visit www.fletchersolicitors.co.uk.
Hello, and welcome back to our podcast series created especially for expectant parents. Throughout this series, we're joined by trusted experts to explore pregnancy and birth, helping you and those supporting you feel informed, prepared, and confident throughout the journey. In this episode, we're joined by Sallyann Beresford, the ultimate birth partner, to explore the important role birth partners can play throughout pregnancy and birth. Together, we discuss how to build a strong support team, prepare for birth together, communicate confidently with maternity professionals, and advocate for the person giving birth.
Well, welcome to this edition of the Mama Podcast. I'm Heidi Eldridge, the CEO and founder of Mama Academy, and your host for today. And I am joined now by Sallyann Beresford. Thank you so much, Sallyann, for joining us today. Can you start by telling our listeners all about you and the fabulous ultimate birth partner that you've set up?
Yeah, thank you so much, Heidi, for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. So I am Sallyann Beresford. I'm a doula predominantly, but I'm also an antenatal educator. And over the last 25 years, I have been supporting couples through this incredible journey of pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. And I learned a lot along the way, as you can imagine. The maternity system was very, very different 25 years ago to what it is now. And I could see very, very clearly, whilst I was on my journey of support, that there was a lot that wasn't happening in terms of what partners understood around their role. And that came out of the courses that I was teaching, really, from being in the classroom with, 8 to 10 couples and them only really learning one tool, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, and that's the BRAIN acronym. And that's a brilliant tool. I'm not dismissing that tool at all. Benefits, risks, alternatives, instincts, and nothing. So it's a really useful thing to know about. But what I was figuring out was that by the time you're asking those kinds of questions, your birth has already been derailed. You've already gone beyond the type of birth that you may have been planning. And I wanted to give couples different tools because I was witnessing births on a weekly basis as a doula, standing and walking alongside couples. And I wanted to provide them with the information that I had learned through my journey and experience of being a doula. So I wrote a book called Labour of Love, The Ultimate Guide to Being a Birth Partner, and I developed a series of tools. And I really set off on a podcast journey like this one as well to provide information to couples in general, and not just couples, because we know that single women have babies. We know that some partners aren't really capable of attending births. They don't want to, maybe. We know that women are being supported by mums and sisters and friends. And all of these people needed a book that was for them. They needed a resource that was for them, that they could access, that wasn't just for, let's say, men in, quotes, because not all women have men as their partners, and not all books should be aimed at them. So I wanted to write the perfect resource that was for anybody that came into contact with a pregnant woman or person during that time. So I did that, and then obviously I set up the podcast and I set up the Instagram account, and that's what I've been doing ever since. Fortunately for me, I had the ability to write a second book because I would say my speciality, whilst I support all birth, I support anything from, C-section through to free birth. Most of the women I was meeting just wanted a physiological hands-off experience. And so I wrote my second book, The Art of Giving Birth, to provide that level of information for them. So yeah, here we are, all these years later, and doing really well and enjoying the support that I offer and the information that I'm out there providing for couples in general.
It sounds fantastic, and we're really honoured to have you on the Mama podcast today. You've obviously been extremely busy. We hear a lot from sort of birthing partners that they worry about doing the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing. What would you say to them to sort of change their mind shift, if you like, so that they can be genuinely useful?
I think that the irony of being a birth partner is that you think you've got to know lots and lots and lots of things, and actually you don't. I've got quite a lot of sayings, and you may hear many of them today. But one of them is that a birth partner can literally make or break the birth experience. And that sounds like high pressure. It sounds like someone might be in a situation where they have to know, 100 things to be the right support for that person. But actually, you're already really qualified to support them just by knowing what they're like as a person. So if you're able to tap into their personality style and really understand them, you will already be well on your way. And for me, that means that the basics that you need to know over and above that is hormones, because hormones are the one thing that can support you to know all of other things. So understanding hormones and really recognizing what she's like as a person and how she's affected by scenarios will give you all the information you need to support her. So, figuring out what she wants. Does she want a planned cesarean? Does she want a home birth? If she wants that or anything in between, your role is to figure out how to help her support that, not bring your own fears, not bring your own agenda into this birth experience, but making sure that you trust them implicitly as the pregnant woman or person to know what's going on. Because another one of my sayings is, I've never ever met a pregnant woman who would ever put herself or her baby in danger. So they will always be able to trust themselves implicitly, and you should trust them too. So if you figure out that she's saying something that's a bit scary for you and that you don't really understand why she wants to do that, those are the kinds of things we need to be looking at. Why do you want to give birth at home? Why do you want a planned cesarean? Why do you want this, or why do you want that? Whatever it is that they're saying that is their idea of what they're looking to achieve, your job is to understand why, and then the rest is completely easy, because once you get their why, you're already everything they need as a birth partner.
That is so helpful and makes so much sense when they completely understand their reasoning and their partner's personality as well. And that really leads in nicely into advocacy.
Yes.
And how a partner can advocate in the right way about, because sometimes they worry about overstepping the mark, but to make sure that that person's birth choices are carried out, and also in appointments or during labour and birth. What are your tips to advocate effectively?
I think as a person that recognizes myself as an advocate, and I attend appointments regularly with my clients, I think again it's finding out what they want from you. So for example, if I'm working with a client and I sit down and say, okay, so we've got this appointment on Thursday, you're being told you need to have an induction of labour, you don't want an induction of labour, how do you want me to interact with the medical support in that room? Do you want to speak for yourself, or do you want me to step up and speak for you? Are you keen to walk out of that meeting with answers, or do you want to sit there, understand what they've got to say, and then we'll buy ourselves some time to leave the room and have a chat alone before giving them the answer of what we are planning. And I think it's about having that open discussion in advance of the meeting to just really clarify what would make them feel safe in that room. Because some will say, honestly, I cannot, I will cry, I don't want to deal with that, I want someone who's going to really speak up for me. And then you get to say, well, I don't know if I'm that person, maybe we need to get someone else to come with you or to support us, a doula, for example. Maybe we need to not go to that meeting yet because we're not ready, we're not mentally prepared. What is it that you want to gain from each session that you have, every conversation you have regarding your birth choices? Because in my mind, from experience, there are some scary things said to pregnant women these days. It's very, very common for you to hear negative, disastrous outcomes if you aren't prepared to go along with the status quo. So we think you need to have an induction or a cesarean because your baby is growing too big, or whatever the example is. And it's very likely that you'll go into that session and hear them tell you that there could be a negative outcome if you don't agree. That doesn't necessarily mean that that is factual, that that is correct, that that is evidence-based information. It's just a question of what is it that you want to do if that is said to you. So I will say to my clients, if that comes up, how do you want me to handle that? Or do you want to handle it? Because some will, for example, accept an induction or a C-section date and then walk out the room, have no intention of attending. They'll cancel when they get home, but they don't want the argument. They don't want to be in a situation where they are having to explain why this is so important to them to avoid the interventions recommended. So based on that, what does the woman want to do? What does the person who's carrying the baby want from you as their advocate? And the same goes for birth preparation. You know, I've seen marriages absolutely fall to pieces in a birth room because the birth partner wasn't the advocate that that person needed on the day. And they may have had another 2 years in that marriage before it fell to pieces. But trust me when I tell you that if you are, you know, not being well supported, it can come back to bite you further down the line. So being honest, being open about your capabilities, about your own fears, about how you really feel your place lies. Yes, I can speak up for you. I'm not sure I can. Let's have a practice of some sayings that I can say. One of my favorites is, she did not give consent. Simple. Can you say that without getting angry? Can you say that without making it, you know, emotional in any way? Are you capable of asking someone to step outside of the room and have a conversation with them away from the labouring woman? Are you able to genuinely keep your cool? Because at all times, the pregnant woman or person has bodily autonomy. So there's no need to get angry. There's no need to get upset, because if she's not consenting and you can say, she did not consent, that is enough to stop that conversation. So there's a lot of preparation that goes with advocacy, and there's a lot of honesty and communication that goes within that. And I think that if you can really open up about why she wants the birth she does and how you can be the best advocate for her, then you're going to be great.
I love that. That is so helpful. And you're right, so much preparation there to really think about. And I guess it works both ways as well, doesn't it? Because if you were to explain to the healthcare professional why you don't want something, and they explain a lot further, then you might find a lot more information out. You know, you might be empowered with more to make a more informed decision. So that works both ways.
Yeah.
We've got some advocacy scripts on our website as well. So we've got two. We've got one for pregnant women and birthing people, but we also have one for the birth partners as well. So they might find that quite helpful.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of practical things that partners can do other than the obvious of install the car seat. What other things do you think they could think about?
I mean, for me, it's showing up, switching your phones off, sitting down face to face, not having any distractions. If you've got older children and you've had a difficult or traumatic birth experience the previous time, make sure you've got childcare that you can really sit down and listen, really sit down and focus. And remember that, writing a birth plan is vital, but that's not going to cut it. This is about understanding how you can really show up for them, being able to read words on the paper that she wrote that says, for example, I decline vaginal examinations unless medically necessary. It's that's not going to cut it. If you've just got this one piece of paper, you need to sit down and understand why that is so important to them. Like, I talk about hard boundaries and soft boundaries. Knowing and understanding the difference between a hard boundary for her or a soft one is vital. So if I've got a woman that will say, for example, I'm not too worried about having an epidural. I don't want like pain relief to be offered to me. I know what's available. I'll ask for it if I choose to have it. But as the birth partner, if you know that that's something that they are not worried about and they start talking about it, that's a soft boundary, isn't it? That's something that's really like, well, I've thought it through, I've done my research, I don't want it shoved in my face, but actually if it comes down to it, that would be on my list. Whereas a hard boundary is where the advocacy really steps in. It doesn't mean they won't change their mind. I've had so many examples of this where I've spoken to women who've said things like, oh, I absolutely know I do not want you to massage me in labor. I hate being touched. And on the day, they're like, can you just press there? And you can't turn around at that point and say, well, you said no. These are the things you need to work out. You need to work out what kinds of things they're thinking, but also not have everything set in stone. She changes her mind, they'll let you know. They'll say, this is what I want now, and you go with the flow. And I think that's really, really important. So looking them in the eye during the preparation sessions, really getting a strong feel. Yes, definitely pack the birth bag with them, definitely install the car seat, but showing up and listening and doing that, honest work is why I always say the birth partner can literally make or break the birth. Because if you think that the most important day or days in both of your lives, you can just turn up with no preparation, unfortunately, that's not going to cut it in 2026 and beyond.
That's very true. That's very true. And I'm just thinking, because you talked about when things change, and obviously during labour and birth, things can get quite intense. They can be unpredictable and things might change. So what is your advice on how to support in those moments as well? Because it can seem quite intimidating, especially if you've not been in, a delivery suite before, for instance.
Yeah. I mean, for me, obviously discussing plan B and C is essential. Always have the conversations, if something happened to the baby, who'd go with the baby to the NICU? If something happened, if there was a certain situation and a decision needed to be made, what would that look like for you? Talk through all the different scenarios. I made a post on social media the other day because I'd had a conversation with a woman who'd said, well, the one thing I'm very keen to avoid is forceps. So I'd rather go straight to C-section than have an instrumental birth. And I said, that's great. And that's absolutely your right to say that in that moment, if that's where you find yourself. But you also need to know that forceps can be used during a cesarean section. And she was absolutely blown away because she didn't know that. So do your due diligence, do the work in advance. Think about what matters to you. Think about the things that you may accept or decline in the event that you end up with plan B or C, and take it from there. But my honest word of advice, which I give this to everybody, and I've got a whole chapter on it in my book, is to use a safety word. So if you are a birth partner and you are looking for the best tip ever, it's that, particularly if what your person is wanting is a physiological birth with very minimal or little to no intervention, having a safety word becomes your best friend. And what this means is that in the event that she or they are struggling, they're having what I call a wobble, they're having complete torture in their own minds about the difference between what they want to achieve and how they're feeling. As the birthing partner, it is never your job to fix it for them. It's your job to believe in them more than they believe in themselves, to walk alongside them and to really help them over those wobbles. I can't do it. I don't think I can do it anymore. I can't this. I can't, no, it's not happening. I don't want this. If they have a safety word and they do not use that safety word, you keep going. You keep walking along, one foot in front of the other beside them as their support team, and you praise them and you don't overcoach them. There's nothing worse than having someone who's there cheering you consistently from the sideline. Keep your praise to a minimum because it can be very distracting, but also believe in their ability, even if they're vocalizing that they're struggling. And I use a brilliant analogy of running a marathon in the book, because for me, I know that you could do all the prep in the world. You could do months and months and months of preparation, and you could buy all the gear and get everyone around you and do the sponsorship thing. And yet on the day, have a moment of doubt. Oh my gosh, I've actually got to do this. This is really hard. As a birth partner, you would never turn around to a runner and say, don't bother. Come on, jump in the car. We'll go and have a pub lunch instead. You'd be there going, you've got this. You can do this. You are going to do this. And we'll be there cheering you on from the sidelines. Now, if somebody sprained their ankle or broke something along the way, of course, that is like using a safety word. It's impossible for them to carry on. There's a really good reason, and they may need to change in that moment to plan B or C. However, if all they're doing is vocalizing that this is really, really tough, then you keep going all the way. If they did use their safety word, it's important to share. That doesn't mean you rescue them, that you take them and pick them up and immediately transport them to safety, because the problem is we're dealing in the UK with the NHS system, and it's not always easy to access care immediately. So there might be a situation where you say, I'm listening, I've heard you. What are you thinking? What do you want to do? And then you can open up the discussion and talk about the reality of where you are. If you're at a home birth, does that involve transferring in? If you're in the birthing pool, does that mean getting out, getting dressed, transferring up to labour ward? Going through these kinds of, scenarios will help make a full decision for, that scenario that you couldn't have imagined. But having a safety word means that you say, okay, I'm listening, I hear you. And that's always my top tip.
That is really helpful. And I'm just thinking about when you can sort of turn that on its head, when it's more appropriate for the partner to do nothing at all, for example, and actually this is a time to sort of give gentle support. How can you sort of know when that's appropriate?
So I think understanding hormones is what's key here. Understanding the role of hormones, understanding the autonomic nervous system, and recognizing the difference between fight and flight and rest and digest. Making sure that you understand the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight and flight, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which is what we're aiming to achieve throughout labour. I like to look for women who are hypervigilant. So for me, it's being able to recognise what they're like as a person in life. How easy do they find it to switch off their thoughts? How much can they really focus in on their breath? What is it that makes them hypervigilant in life? Do they find it really annoying when they've got the telly on and they're trying to work? Or do they prefer it to be completely silent? Are they the kind of person that could work in any environment and it wouldn't bother them at all? Really getting to grips with what they're like as a person. And then when you know this and you see them on the day of the birth, I call it hypervigilance, because what I would describe is a woman that looks like she's trying to relax, but actually she's got one eye half open all of the time. She's hyper aware of what is going on around her, and she cannot switch off at all. I've written a really great 28-page resource called Space, and it's looking at safety, privacy, advocacy, looking at what the conditions are and the environment that a woman needs to create the right situation for physiological birth to take place. Being honest with yourself and being honest about what you're seeing in them as the birth partner is absolutely essential for this, because if you know that the only way to dilate is to produce high enough levels of oxytocin that she is able to progress in labour and have these wonderful, powerful sensations that work, you will be able to create and help create the conditions and the environment for that to be released. You have to understand hormones. You have to really recognise what they're like as a person to be able to get there, in my opinion.
So how can that work when your partner isn't romantically involved with you? Because you mentioned that earlier, you can have mums, you can have siblings, you can have friends. What strengths do they bring?
All sorts of strengths, because actually romantic partners can also be quite irritating. That's the other thing, you need to be honest with your partner too. That's why a lot of women really struggle with mums and sisters, even though often they'll say, oh, my mum really wants to be at my birth, but I think she'll drive me mad. Being really able to sit and say, I'm worried because I know that I need to be producing high levels of this particular hormone. I'm worried that you're going to stress me out, that you're going to irritate me. Thinking about how to make sure you communicate your wants and needs to the people you're inviting into this space is so, so valuable. And of course, if you can afford one, hire a doula, because the preparation sessions you'll do in advance of the labour and birth will bring about these conversations. Doulas will sit with you. They will talk through all of this stuff. They will help support you to get this off your chest and have really honest, conversations that will make sure that these situations don't come up during the birth process.
That's also really helpful. And we have a maternity directory on our website, actually, which has lots of different services, including doulas and independent midwives and things like that. So people can go and have a look at that and see what's available in their area. I'm just thinking, when the baby arrives, obviously the attention sort of goes straight to the baby. But what can partners sort of miss for mum in those early sort of few days and weeks that she might need help with?
I definitely recommend making a postpartum plan, sitting down together during the antenatal sessions that you set time aside for, and talk about where you're at with postpartum. When I'm teaching, I do an exercise called relationship circles, and I have a podcast episode on this. So if you look up the Ultimate Birth Partner podcast, you'll find it. And relationship circles is all about identifying what support you have around you and who is going to be able to really give you the right level. So let me try and explain. If you've got someone who you're not prepared to them to see parts of your body exposed, they might not be the ideal people to have around in the early days and weeks. If you've got someone that is a great cook or is really hands-on, but they're not necessarily a family member, but you feel really safe with them, they are the right person. So when you do a relationship circle, sort of situation, and you sit down together and you talk openly and honestly, and you map out who is in your life, who could provide you with a safe, support network. It doesn't necessarily have to be your mum, your sister. It could be one particular friend who's had this particular situation recently, and you know that they fully understand why you're, doing what you're doing, what have you. So look at your circumstances and talk openly about who can give you support. So that's part of the postpartum planning. Then think about, how are you going to get through those early days and weeks? What type of person are you? Are you the kind of person that's going to want to climb into bed and spend 14 days solidly skin to skin with your baby? Because obviously that, doesn't appeal to everybody. And if you're not that kind of person, be really honest. Some people don't want to breastfeed, some people do. What support do you have locally to you if you do want to breastfeed that you can access at a moment's notice? What kind of people will think it's their right to come and visit you and your baby when it isn't? What conversations do you need to have with those people? Thinking about how you word those conversations, how you can say, we know you love us and we know you're desperate to meet the baby, but we're going to be shutting the doors for a little bit of time, and unfortunately we aren't in a position to see you in those early days. Deal with it all in the pregnancy, and then that way you are giving yourself the right start and enabling those people to overcome any disappointment that they might have regarding your wishes and the support you do or don't need.
Setting those expectations early. I wish I'd known about that before I had my son, because that's something my partner really could have helped advocate against, because it was like a nativity scene. Like, we had queues outside the door of everyone wanting to come and see him. And you go with the flow and you go along with it, but it's only afterwards you think, actually, that was quite tough, having so many people come in and out when you're trying to establish a breastfeeding routine, etc. So that's a really helpful tip.
I mean, it's fair to say you don't know how you're going to feel, but of course that comes back down to the pregnancy and birth planning. Nothing is ever set in stone. So if you find yourself in a situation where you change your mind and you go, oh, actually, I feel amazing, I'm quite happy for people to come around, you can invite them. It's not like you said, I will not see anybody, so therefore I have to carry that through. But I think that what's really important is that you have conversations with your family, your partner has conversations with theirs, and you deal with it that way. I mean, I always give an example of my father-in-law coming to visit me in hospital and looking at my tummy and saying, oh my God, have you got another one in there? And being so horrified. And he was joking. If I had my time again, I would say to my husband, your dad's a bit of a joker and he likes to think he's funny. Can you just prepare him for the fact that when I'm in the immediate postpartum period, it's actually not appropriate to make jokes about me? Because If I'd have done that, I would have saved myself years of hurt, because my son's 28 now, and that stayed with me. And so look at who you've got around you. What are they like? What do you need to tell them, or what do you not need to tell them? Like, I've got clients, for example, who want a home birth. They would never dream of telling any member of their family that they're giving birth at home. So they just don't tell them. They don't need to. It's none of their business. They can talk to them about hospital birth and, imply that they're giving birth in hospital, and then go ahead and have a home birth. And same the other way round. If you want to have a medicalized birth experience and you live in a holistic family and they don't think that that's a good choice, so be it. Let them have that feeling. Let them have that, but don't let them inflict that on you. And so being really, really sort of like clear about who you're planning to talk to about your preferences regarding birth and postpartum, and how you raise your child, because it's no one else's business how you decide to raise your child. So yeah, having the ability to really think these things through and discuss them, because the one thing you do not want to do when you are in the early postpartum period is be arguing with your partner about your families when you are the most exhausted you're ever going to be in your entire life. There is no time like the early postpartum that you will ever experience again. It can feel like torture for some people with the lack of sleep. And the one thing you need to be able to do is help each other through that time. If you're not in a relationship and you are going through this experience and you are relying on other people, be equally as honest about how you might find this experience, and say, look, I just want to say, if I'm snappy, or if I feel this, or if I say this, or if I do that, I really, really don't mean it. I just know that I trust you enough that you're the person that I've taken it out on. And I want you to know that I won't mean it. I just might be so shattered that you're the only person here that I've got to be snappy at. And just being really mindful that this is a unique time in your lives, and you will never, ever go through something in this way unless you're having another child.
Yeah, and it happens again. That is so true. So it's just as equally important to prepare for things in a practical way,
Yeah.
and think of who is going to be helpful for you practically as well as emotionally as well.
Yeah.
And how can partners, check in with the emotional side of things without sort of feeling like it's an interrogation?
Well, in the antenatal preparation sessions, I recommend talking through how you liked to be checked in with, how you think you would feel. So I use this example for labour and birth, and I'll give you a similar example for postpartum. When you're in a situation where you might forget to breathe during your labour, you might be the kind of person that wants somebody to get down beside you and start inhaling and exhaling and breathing with you. Or you might be the kind of person that if they did that, you'd want to punch them in the face, because that would be so annoying that they are breathing alongside you that you don't like it. Or you might be the kind of person that says, what I want you to do if I'm forgetting to breathe is count me through the surges. 1, 2, 3. Whatever it is, you get to talk about that in the pregnancy. Exactly the same with postpartum. Yes, it's still an issue that you don't know how you're going to feel, but you can have a plan in place during your postpartum planning. And you can also come up with some mantras or some positive affirmations of some description that they might be able to use that will help you overcome any feelings that you might be experiencing. It might be that you want them to go away and that you say, please don't think I'm being rude, but can you just give me some space? You might need to sort of have an idea about how you communicate things. So I was talking to some people the other day. We run a local birth circle, and we were talking about postpartum, and I was saying, some women are told sleep when the baby sleeps, and that makes them want to punch that person in the face, because they are literally like, I can't sleep when the baby sleeps, you don't understand. And so there might be a list of things that you can talk about. So you might say, okay, so a couple of options here. You can go around the block for a walk. You can go and get yourself a nap, have a lie down. I'll take the baby and you can start doing some other stuff, because some women, modern women, really like to feel in control, and the house might be doing their head in. And they feel so out of control that really what they want is to just tidy up a bit. And for them, that's enough for them to get back into the right mindset. And sometimes they want the baby to be walked around the block so that they can't hear the baby cry. And they're the ones in the kitchen preparing dinner. So it's not always true that you as the partner have to take all the jobs off of her. You actually can check in and say, all right, there's a couple of options. I could do this, I could do that, I could do the other. Because if you just ask the basic question, what do you want me to do? Then they've got to think for you. So if you're putting that ball into their court in a practical way by saying, okay, what would work for you right now? And give them the list of practical options that you could offer them. That is a much better way of dealing with any given scenario if she's feeling exhausted, emotional, and feeling like she's losing control.
Yes, I can definitely relate to that myself. And I'm just thinking, like, for anyone that's listening right now, their partner, they're about to walk into a, birthing room for the first time. What piece of advice would you give them?
Oh, I think trust the pregnant woman or person more than you trust the strangers in that room, because you're going home with them. You're not going home with the doctor, who's only there for a 12-hour shift and who might recommend one thing to you, even though they've never met you before. They've walked into that environment. They don't have a clue what she's like as a person. Remember, birth isn't just about an experience. It's a physical thing that's happening to her body, and she has body autonomy. She is completely aware of what is going on. She can feel that baby moving inside them and not be in a situation where somebody might say, oh, we recommend this, we recommend that, if that's going to have a dramatic effect on her and them in general. So for me, it's trust the person you're supporting over and above everybody else, and buy time. As long as the baby's okay and the woman's okay, buy time and say, look, thank you so much for that information. Do you mind stepping outside of the room while we have a conversation? Check in with her and find out what it is she wants to do next. And if she's not sure, think of more questions you can ask until she is sure, because informed decision making is the one thing that keeps birth safe for a woman in the postpartum period. If you're making well-informed decisions, there will never be a point where they look back and go, why did we do that? Why did we do that? That didn't feel right to me. I don't know why I was pushed into that. And that's really, really important. Buy time. And when I say if there isn't time, it's they're not okay and the baby's not okay, you will know it, because an emergency will be ensuing and you will be able to tell that something is drastically wrong. So if that's the case, that's fine. Everyone wants the baby or the woman to be alive at the end of the experience, but you don't want to throw her under the bus to get there if there isn't any reason to do that. By the time, get them out, have a conversation, make sure you're making well-informed decisions, and then you'll be absolutely fine. And I think it's so important also in that early postpartum period as well, because often, let's say, I'll give you an example of the umbilical cord. The amount of times I've been at a birth and the woman has done so much reading and so much research in the pregnancy, and they've said the one thing that's really important to me is I do not want the umbilical cord cut and clamped before it has gone white and empty. And within minutes after the birth, the midwife said, "Oh, that looks finished now, I'll just put the clamps on." And the partner doesn't do anything, and afterwards they are absolutely gutted because the cord was clamped too soon. And so if there are things that are important, you need to continue your advocacy well into that early postpartum period, because the birth isn't over until you are discharged. Basically, there's a lot of advocacy that needs to take place in those hours and days that follow the actual arrival of the baby.
Well, that's such powerful, should I say, powerful advice. Thank you. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation with you, Sallyann. There's lots of things that parents can take away from this. What's the one thing you want them to remember from this whole episode? Although I'm going to remember lots of things, but if there's one vital thing, what would that be?
Definitely to use a safety word. From my point of view, especially if a person you're supporting as the birth partner wants a physiological birth, this is something I would not enter the birth room without, because I want the women I support to be able to vocalize as much as they want and tell me it's as hard as they're finding it without me thinking I need to rescue them. So I think if the birth partner was in fact male, that would be even harder, because they automatically want to fix things. And so you want to enter that space with a safety word and then let them go. Let them be as vocal as they want. Let them tell you 100 times they're struggling without you needing to rush in and rescue them, because actually birth is hard and we do struggle. And if she was running that marathon and walking past you and crying tears of desperation for this to be over, you're more likely to jump into the race and run beside them than you ever are to pull them out of the race and say, "Don't bother, I'll come on, we'll go and get some lunch." Absolutely no, you would never do that. You would encourage and keep them going. So for me, using a safety word is vital, but making sure that they are fully aware a safety word is not the end of the line. It's not the solution. It's the start of moving into what we might do next, because some women will be in transition and they will use the safety word because they are definite they cannot go on, but actually the baby is not far behind. So it's very much just the starting point of the possible plan B or C.
Absolutely, that's such a great top tip. It just reminds me when you're running a marathon and you have that mind block, everyone gets it, they hit the wall, I think they call it, they hit the wall, but then they keep going, and then they end up sprinting across the finish line. So yeah, that's such a lovely analogy to have.
And imagine how disappointed they feel if you didn't believe in them enough to encourage them to keep going.
That's so true.
Yeah.
So where can people find you? Where can they find your fabulous resources and the books that you've written and the courses that you do as well?
So my main resource would be Instagram. You can look up the Ultimate Birth Partner on Instagram, and on the link in there, you'll find all of my resources, the books, the podcast, the courses. They're all linked in the link that comes with that. And I also have a website, sallyanberesford.co.uk. So you can always look me up on there. And if you're in the Warwickshire, West Midlands or Worcestershire area, come to my birth circles. I run it with 4 other doulas, and we have the most amazing time supporting families in the area. So you'd be always welcome to get in touch and come and join us in person.
Well, that's fabulous. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Sallyann. It's been a
Oh,
really insightful conversation, and we can't wait for you to produce lots of other things. We're going to tune into your podcast, and no doubt we'll have you back on the show very soon.
thank you so much for having me, Heidi.
Fletcher's Solicitors are proud to sponsor the Mama Academy podcast series. We are one of the UK's leading birth injury specialists, trusted by families with the most complex legal cases. We champion better maternity care through every family's story. Fletcher's Solicitors, for every birth, for every baby, for every family. For more information about how we can help, visit www.fletchersolicitors.co.uk.
If you enjoyed listening to this episode, share it with a friend or colleague. Make sure you follow us so you don't miss out on our next episode. If you'd like to support our work by fundraising or volunteering, please email contact@mamaacademy.org.uk. For more information on pregnancy and maternity services, please visit our website at www.mamaacademy.org.uk. We're also on all of your favourite social media channels. See you next time!